She thought her husband loved her, until the night he locked her outside during a gunfight and left her to die. Bleeding in a dark alley, she was saved by a mysterious billionaire who told her the truth. Her marriage was a lie, and she'd just inherited an empire her husband had been stealing from. Now the abandoned wife is coming back, not for revenge, but to take her throne. The bullet missed Elena's head by 3 inches. She didn't scream. There wasn't time. Her husband's hand shoved her backward through the mansion's side door, and she stumbled into the Los Angeles night, wearing nothing but a silk evening gown and bare feet. "Marco," she gasped, but the door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Behind that door, gunfire erupted like thunder. Elena pressed her back against the cold stucco wall, heart hammering so hard it hurt. This wasn't supposed to happen. The dinner party had been peaceful. Politicians, lawyers, men in expensive suits drinking wine and discussing real estate. Marco had smiled at her across the table. That same cold smile he'd worn for 3 years. Then the window shattered. Now she was outside, alone, and the shooting inside the mansion was getting closer to the door.
Run.
The word came from some primal part of her brain, and her body obeyed before her mind caught up. She ran down the hill, away from the estate, her feet screaming as they hit gravel and pavement. The Pacific Palisades neighborhood was built for beauty, not escape. Tall walls, long driveways.
No witnesses.
She ran until her lungs burned, until the gunfire faded, until she stumbled into an alley behind a closed restaurant in Santa Monica. Her vision blurred. Something warm and wet ran down her arm.
Blood.
She'd been grazed after all. Elena collapsed against a dumpster, trying to control her breathing. 3 years of marriage to Marco Vestri, and it had come to this. 3 years of playing the perfect wife while he conducted business. 3 years of ignoring the truth. But 2 weeks ago, she'd found the documents in his safe. Her hands shook as she remembered. The marriage certificate dated 1 week after her father's funeral. The contracts transferring her inheritance, assets she didn't even know existed, into Marco's control. The emails discussing her like a transaction. The Castellano girl doesn't know what her father left behind. Once we're married, the Chicago accounts unlock automatically. She's easy to manage. She'd married a man who'd never loved her, who'd targeted her, used her. And tonight, she'd been about to confront him when the attack happened. Footsteps echoed in the alley. Elena's body went rigid. She tried to make herself smaller behind the dumpster, but there was nowhere to hide. The footsteps were deliberate, slow. Not running, hunting. A figure appeared at the alley entrance, backlit by streetlights.
Male. Tall.
She couldn't see his face. "Please," she whispered, hating how broken she sounded. "Please, I don't have anything." Elena Castellano, his voice was deep, calm. Not a question. A confirmation. Her blood went cold. He knew her maiden name. Not Vestri.
Castellano.
"Who are you?" she managed. The man walked closer. He wore all black, a face mask covering everything but his eyes. Those eyes, dark, calculating, studied her like she was a puzzle he'd already solved. "Someone who's been looking for you," he said. "And you're bleeding. Stay back." He raised one hand, and suddenly the alley flooded with more figures. 5 men, maybe 6, materializing from the shadows. All armed. All moving with military precision. Elena tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The blood loss was catching up to her. The masked man crouched in front of her, careful not to touch. "You have 2 choices," he said quietly. "You can stay here and bleed out, and Marco's enemies will find you first. They'll use you as leverage, torture you for information, then kill you anyway." He paused. "Or you can come with me." "Why would I trust you?" "You shouldn't." His eyes held hers. "But I'm not the one who locked you out of your own home while people tried to kill you." The words hit like a physical blow.
He was right.
Marco had pushed her outside. Marco had locked the door. Marco had left her to die. "Who are you?" she asked again. Someone who benefits from keeping you alive, he stood and gestured to his men. Decide quickly, Mrs. Vestry. The alley cameras show multiple vehicles headed this way, and they're not police. Elena's survival instinct warred with logic. This man was dangerous, that much was obvious. But he was here. He'd found her. And something about the way he said her name, Castellano, not Vestry. What do you want from me? A hint of something, amusement? Respect flickered in his eyes. Right now? To stop you from dying in an alley like garbage, he held out his hand. The bigger conversation can wait until you're not bleeding. In the distance, Elena heard car engines. Multiple vehicles moving fast. She looked at the masked man's outstretched hand, at his patient, unwavering stance, at the armed men waiting for his command. Then she looked at her bloody arm, at the dirty alley, at the life she'd run from. The Castellano girl doesn't know what her father left behind. Maybe she didn't know, but maybe it was time to learn. Elena took his hand. His grip was firm, steadying her as she stood. He nodded once to his men, and suddenly she was surrounded, protected, guided toward the mouth of the alley, where a black armored SUV waited with its engine running. Wait, she said as they reached the vehicle. I need to know. Did Marco send you? The masked man opened the door, and for just a moment, he leaned close enough that she could hear him clearly over the approaching engines. Marco Vestry thinks you're already dead, he said softly. Let's keep it that way. Then she was inside the SUV, and the door closed, and they were moving through Los Angeles streets at high speed, leaving her old life bleeding out in that alley behind them. Elena pressed her hand against the tinted window, watching the city blur past. She should be terrified. She should be fighting, screaming, demanding answers. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years.
Alive.
Elena woke to the sound of waves. For a moment, she forgot everything. The gunfire, the alley, the masked man. Then pain flared in her bandaged arm, and memory crashed back like those waves against rock. She sat up too quickly. The room spun. Easy, a woman's voice, firm but not unkind. You lost blood. The doctor stitched you up, but you need rest. Elena focused on the speaker, a woman in her 40s, dressed in tactical gear, standing by the door like a guard. Beyond her, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed an endless stretch of ocean bathed in early morning light. Where am I? Malibu. Safe. The woman's expression didn't change. He'll be here in 5 minutes. There's clothes in the closet, bathroom through that door. I'd get dressed if I were you. She left before Elena could ask who he was. The bathroom was obscenely luxurious, marble, gold fixtures, a shower big enough for 4 people. Elena caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her dark hair was matted with sweat and grime. Her evening gown was gone, replaced by soft cotton pajamas. Someone had cleaned the blood from her skin. She showered quickly, hyper-aware that strangers had undressed her, touched her while she was unconscious. But the hot water felt like resurrection. She dressed in the clothes provided, designer jeans that fit perfectly, a simple black cashmere sweater, soft leather boots. Everything in her exact size. That should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her. They knew everything about her. Elena emerged to find the bedroom empty, but the door was open now. She followed the sound of voices down a hallway lined with expensive art, Rothko, Basquiat, pieces that belonged in museums. The house opened into a vast living area where the ocean seemed to pour through the windows. And there, standing with his back to her, was the man from the alley. No mask this time. Sit, he said without turning around. Breakfast is coming. Elena stayed standing. I want answers first. He turned slowly and Elena's breath caught. The man was perhaps 35, with dark hair and darker eyes that seemed to catalog everything about her in seconds. Sharp jaw, expensive watch, tailored black shirt. He looked like he belonged on a Forbes cover, not in a criminal's world. But those eyes. Those eyes had seen things that left marks. "You're standing," he observed. "Good. Means the doctor did his job." He gestured to a chair. "Please. You're not a prisoner, Elena. You're a guest. Kidnapped guests usually aren't given a choice." A slight smile touched his lips. "You had a choice in the alley. You chose to live." She couldn't argue with that. Elena sat, keeping her back straight, her expression neutral. All the things Marco had taught her about never showing weakness. The man sat across from her, completely relaxed. "My name is Kale Romano. Does that mean anything to you?"
It did.
Even sheltered as she'd been, Elena had heard whispers about Kale Romano. West Coast operations. East Coast connections. A billionaire who'd built an empire on both legitimate business and activities that existed in shadows. Marco had mentioned him once, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. "You're Marco's enemy," she said. "I'm a lot of people's enemy," Kale leaned back. "But specifically, yes. Your husband and I have been circling each other for 3 years. Coincidentally, the same 3 years you've been married." The emphasis on coincidentally made her skin prickle. "You've been watching me. I've been watching Marco. You were collateral," his gaze sharpened. "Until 2 weeks ago, when you accessed Marco's safe. You found something, didn't you?" Elena's heart hammered. How could he possibly know that? "The look on your face tells me I'm right." Kale stood and walked to the windows.
Elena Castellano Vestri.
26 years old. Orphaned at 23 when your father, Vincent Castellano, died in a car accident in Chicago. You inherited nothing, or so you thought. 6 months later, you met Marco at a charity gala. He courted you quickly. Married you within 3 months, he glanced back. Love at first sight, he claimed. It wasn't, Elena whispered.
No.
It was calculated. Kale pulled out his phone, tapped something, and a screen descended from the ceiling. Images appeared. Marco meeting with older men, spreadsheets, property deeds. Your father didn't leave you nothing, Elena. He left you everything. But it was locked. Accounts that required his daughter's marriage to activate. Assets hidden under corporate shells. Leverage over half the Midwest operations. The screen shifted to a document. Her marriage certificate. Next to it, a contract she'd never seen. Marco married you to unlock your father's empire, Kale said quietly. The moment you signed that certificate, he gained access to 40 million in liquid assets and information that could destroy or control a dozen crime families. You weren't his wife. You were his key. Elena stared at the screen, at proof of her own stupidity. Why are you telling me this? Because last night, Marco tried to have you killed. Those weren't his men.
No.
They were rivals. But Marco knew they were coming. Kale's voice went cold. He left you exposed deliberately. If you died, he kept everything and played the grieving widower. If you survived but ran, you'd disappear and he'd still control your assets. Either way, he won. Then why didn't he succeed? Kale smiled, and it wasn't kind. Because I've been waiting 3 years for Marco to make a mistake. And last night, he made the biggest one of his life. He stepped closer. He threw away the one weapon that could actually destroy him. Elena stood on shaking legs. I'm not a weapon. Not yet. Kale's eyes locked on hers. But Marco's entire empire is built on your father's legacy. Every ally, every account, every piece of leverage, it all traces back to Vincent Castellano. And Vincent Castellano's heir isn't Marco Vestri. He paused. It's you. The ocean roared beyond the windows. Elena felt like she was drowning. What do you want from me? I want Marco's empire to crumble, Kale said simply. And I want you alive to watch it happen. What happens after that? That's up to you. The drive to Long Beach took 40 minutes. Elena sat in the back of Kale's armored SUV, watching California blur past, her mind racing faster than the vehicle. Kale hadn't spoken since they left Malibu. He worked on a tablet, occasionally taking calls in a language Elena didn't recognize. Russian maybe. Or Ukrainian. His calm unnerved her more than threats would have. Where exactly are we going? She finally asked. Somewhere you need to see. Kale didn't look up. Before you decide whether you believe me. I saw the documents. Documents can be faked. Now he met her eyes. What I'm about to show you can't be. They pulled into an industrial area near the harbor, all shipping containers and forgotten warehouses. The SUV stopped at a building that looked abandoned from the outside. Inside, it was anything but. The space had been converted into a high-tech surveillance center. Screens covered every wall, showing live feeds from what looked like a dozen different locations. 3 people worked at computer stations, barely glancing up as Cale entered. "Pull up November 10th, Cale ordered. "The Palisades feed, 1800 hours forward." A young man with glasses nodded and typed rapidly. The largest screen flickered to life, showing multiple camera angles of Marco's mansion from the previous night. Elena's breath caught. "You are watching the house." "I'm always watching Marco," Cale gestured to a chair.
Seat.
"This is going to be hard to watch." The footage showed the dinner party from outside angles, guests arriving, Marco greeting them, Elena visible through the windows in her evening gown. She looked so unaware, so fragile. Had she really been that blind? "Fast forward to 2100, Cale said. The timestamp jumped. Now the footage showed a group of men approaching the mansion from the rear. 8 of them, heavily armed. They moved with purpose, not stealth. "Dominic Renzo's crew," Cale narrated quietly. "New York operation, allied with the Bratva. Marco's been encroaching on their territory for months." Elena watched the men breach the back entrance. Seconds later, gunfire erupted inside the house. She could see the muzzle flashes through the windows. "Now watch this," Cale said, his voice harder. The angle switched to an interior camera. Cale had eyes inside the mansion. Elena saw herself standing frozen in the hallway, Marco grabbing her arm. She remembered this moment, the terror in his eyes, the way he'd pulled her toward the side door. But then Cale slowed the footage. "Look at his face," he said. "Watch his expression when he opens that door." Elena leaned forward. On screen, Marco's face transformed the instant before he shoved her outside. The fear vanished. His eyes went cold, calculated. And just before the door closed, he glanced back at the approaching gunman and then at her. He knew. He'd positioned her exactly where they'd find her.
No, Elena whispered.
"Keep watching." The exterior camera showed her stumbling away from the house. Inside, Marco was on his phone, not calling for help but texting. The footage was clear enough to capture his expression, satisfaction. "What did he send?" Elena asked, her voice hollow. Cale nodded to the tech, who pulled up a new screen. A text message thread appeared, the sender identified as Marco Vestri. "She's outside. East Side Alley.
Alone.
Make it look random." The reply came instantly. Confirmed. "Cleaning up now." Elena felt like she'd been punched. "He told them where to find me." He did more than that. Cale pulled up another message, this one from 2 days earlier. "Marco to someone named Luca. Renzo's crew is planning something for Friday. Don't interfere. Let it happen. The wife becomes a liability after. Loose end needs tying." The room tilted. Elena gripped the chair arms to steady herself. "Loose end," she repeated numbly. "That's what I was. A loose end." "You accessed his safe 2 weeks ago," Cale said, not unkindly. "He knew you'd seen the documents. He knew you understood what he'd done. So he arranged for you to die in a gang attack, completely deniable, while he played the devastated survivor." Elena stared at the screens, at the evidence of her husband's betrayal. It was one thing to know Marco didn't love her. It was another to see him actively orchestrating her murder. "Why didn't you warn me?" she asked suddenly. "If you were watching, if you knew. Would you have believed me?"
Cale countered.
"Or would you have run to Marco and told him someone was spreading lies about him?" He was right. 2 weeks ago, she would have defended Marco, made excuses. Even after finding those documents, part of her had wanted to believe there was an explanation. "I sent my team to the alley because I knew that's where you'd run," Cale continued. "I've been tracking Marco's communications for months. When I saw that text, I had about 6 minutes to get to you first." He paused. "I almost didn't make it." Elena looked at him. This dangerous man who'd save her life for his own purposes. What happens now? Now you decide. Kale shut down the screens. Marco thinks you're dead or disappeared. His enemies think the same. You have something most people never get, a chance to stop existing on someone else's terms and start existing on yours. I won't lie to you, Elena. I need you to destabilize Marco's position. Your disappearance already has people asking questions. His allies are nervous. His enemies are circling. Kale's dark eyes held hers. But I'm not Marco. I won't force you. You can walk away right now. I'll give you money, a new identity, transport anywhere in the world. Or you learn how to protect yourself. Learn how this world actually works. Learn to use the power your father left you instead of being a pawn in someone else's game. He stepped closer. And when you're ready, you expose Marco for exactly what he is. Elena thought of Marco's cold eyes. His calculated shove. That text message. Loose and needs tying. She thought of her father, who'd apparently built an empire she'd never known about. She thought of the woman she'd been yesterday. Obedient, decorative, disposable. Teach me, she said. Kale smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The compound was hidden so deep in the Northern California mountains that Elena lost cell signal an hour before they arrived. No phones, no internet, no outside contact, Kale explained as they drove through dense forest. For the next 2 weeks, you don't exist. Marco's people are searching for a body. Let them search. The facility appeared suddenly, a collection of modern buildings disguised to look like a luxury wellness retreat. Solar panels, natural wood, huge windows overlooking pine forests. Beautiful camouflage for something else entirely. Kale handed her off to a woman named Sarah Chin, ex-CIA, who looked Elena up and down with clinical assessment. She's soft, Sarah said bluntly. This going to be a problem? That's why she's here, Kale replied. He turned to Elena. I'll be back in 1 week. Sarah's in charge. Do exactly what she tells you. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone with a woman who looked like she could kill someone 12 different ways before breakfast. First rule, Sarah said. Forget everything you think you know about being safe. Your entire life, you've relied on other people, your father, then Marco, to protect you. That ends today. She started walking toward the main building. Follow me. And keep up. The next 2 weeks rewired Elena's brain. Day 1 started at 5 a.m. Sarah woke her by yanking the blankets off and tossing workout clothes at her face. Situational awareness drill, Sarah announced. You're going to walk through the compound. I've placed 15 people in various positions. Some are threats, some aren't. You identify each one and explain why. Elena stumbled through it, missing obvious dangers, flagging innocent staff members. Sarah made her repeat the exercise 6 times until she could spot the behavioral tells. Wrong posture, unnatural stillness, hands positioned near weapons. In Marco's world, everyone is a potential threat, Sarah explained during a break. But most threats announce themselves if you know what to look for. Predators have patterns. Day 3 brought Helena Volkov, a former negotiator who'd worked with Russian oligarchs and Middle Eastern cartels. You think power comes from guns, Helena said in her thick accent, circling Elena like a shark.
Wrong.
Power comes from information and leverage. Your husband controlled you because you didn't understand the game. We fix that now. Helena taught her how to read financial documents, identify shell companies, trace money through offshore accounts. Elena learned that her father's dormant assets were actually a sophisticated network of legitimate businesses that generated millions annually, all of which had been feeding Marco's operation for 3 years. See this holding company? Helena pointed to a spreadsheet. Owns 3 construction firms in Chicago. Those firms have contracts with the city. That's not criminal money. That's political leverage. Your father was brilliant. He built power that couldn't be seized or frozen because it looked completely legal. And Marco's been using it. Marco's been spending it like an idiot, Helena corrected. He doesn't understand what he has. He sees money. He doesn't see the network, the relationships, the leverage your father spent 20 years building. She looked at Elena seriously. But you could. Day 7 brought combat training, though not the kind Elena expected. Marcus Webb, a former Marine, taught her how to escape holds, create distance, identify exits. "You're not becoming a fighter," he clarified when she struggled with a defensive move. "You're learning to survive long enough to run, or for help to arrive." He made her practice getting out of a car quickly, navigating a room to keep obstacles between her and an attacker, using everyday objects as weapons. Practical, unglamorous, effective. "Most women in your position die because they freeze," Marcus said. "Or they try to fight when they should run. Or they run when they should talk. We're teaching you to assess and adapt." But the most important lessons came from Cale himself, who returned on day 8. He found her in the compound's library, surrounded by folders containing surveillance reports on Marco's operations. "Learning anything interesting?" he asked. Elena didn't look up. "Marco's overextended. He's got operations in 4 states, but not enough loyal people to manage them. Half his crew are mercenaries who'll flip for better pay," she tapped a report. "And he's hemorrhaging money. My father's assets generate income, but Marco's spending faster than it comes in. Another 6 months, and he'll be vulnerable." Cale sat down across from her, impressed. "Helena's been teaching you. Helena's been showing me what my father built and how Marco's destroying it." Elena finally met his eyes. "My father wasn't just a criminal, was he? Vincent Castellano was a strategist. He understood that real power in America doesn't come from violence, it comes from being necessary. Politicians needed his construction companies. Unions needed his negotiation. Other families needed his mediation." Cale leaned forward. "He built himself into the infrastructure. Removing him would collapse systems people depended on. And Marco doesn't understand that. Marco understands muscle and fear. He's a blunt instrument." Cale's expression hardened. "Which is why he'll fall. The question is what replaces him." Elena closed the folder. "You keep saying you need me to destabilize Marco. But that's not the whole truth, is it? You don't just want him weakened. You want his territory. I want the chaos his fall will create, yes."
And me?
"Where do I fit in your plans after Marco's gone?" Cale stood, walking to the window. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, "I expected you to be a pawn, Elena. A useful tool to use and discard. But you're learning faster than I anticipated." Asking better questions, he turned back to her. "So, honestly, I don't know where you fit yet. That might depend on how far you're willing to go." "How far do I need to go?" "Far enough that Marco can never hurt you again," Cale said quietly. "Far enough that you become the thing he should have feared from the beginning." Elena looked at the folders, at the evidence of her father's genius and her husband's stupidity, at the chance to become something other than a victim. "Then let's keep going," she said. Cale smiled. 2 more days. Then we go to San Francisco. There's someone you need to meet." The financial office in San Francisco looked like a law firm, polished, discreet, the kind of place that managed money for people who preferred invisibility over flash. Cale led Elena through a private entrance, up an elevator that required both a keycard and fingerprint scan. "The man we're meeting is named Arthur Leong. He was your father's financial advisor for 15 years. Marco doesn't know he exists." "How is that possible?" "Because Arthur is very good at being invisible." The elevator opened into a penthouse office with views of the Bay Bridge. "And because your father kept certain assets completely separate from his public holdings." Arthur Leong was 70, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when they entered, his gaze fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "My God," he said softly, "you look just like your mother."
Elena froze.
No one ever mentioned her mother, who died when Elena was 6. "You knew her?" "I knew both your parents." Arthur gestured to chairs facing his desk. "Sit, please. We have much to discuss, and I suspect very little time to do it." Once they were seated, Arthur opened a leather portfolio. "Miss Castellano, I'm going to share information that your father explicitly instructed me to keep from you unless certain conditions were met. Those conditions have now been satisfied." "What conditions?" "That you demonstrated you could survive without protection." Arthur glanced at Cale. When Mr. Romano contacted me 2 days ago and explained your situation, I knew Vincent's fears had come true. He worried someone would marry you for access to his empire. He built safeguards, but clearly they weren't enough. Elena's hands tightened on the chair arms. My father knew someone might do this. Your father spent his life understanding human nature. He knew power attracts predators. Arthur pulled out a thick document, which is why he structured his most valuable assets in a way that Marco Vestri cannot access, no matter what papers he's forged or what legal claims he makes. He slid the document across the desk. Elena stared at the header. The Castellano Trust, Irrevocable Holdings. What is this? Your inheritance. The real 1-inch. Arthur opened the document to a page marked with a tab. Marco gained access to approximately $40 million in liquid assets through your marriage, along with control of several business entities. What he doesn't know is that those assets represent roughly 15% of what your father actually owned. Elena's vision blurred. What? The remaining 85% is held in this trust, which can only be accessed by Vincent Castellano's direct heir upon reaching age 25 or, Arthur paused meaningfully, upon demonstrating to the trustee that she is capable of managing such responsibility. I turned 26 4 months ago, Elena whispered. I know, but you were married to Marco Vestri, living under his control, showing no signs of independence. I couldn't release the trust to someone who would simply hand it over to her husband. Arthur's expression softened. Your father's instructions were clear. His heir must prove she can stand alone. Cale spoke for the first time. And now Miss Castellano has left an abusive marriage, survived an assassination attempt, and is actively seeking to understand her father's legacy rather than simply spend his money. Arthur looked at Elena. That, I believe, satisfies Vincent's requirements. Elena's hands shook as she turned pages. Offshore accounts, property holdings, investment portfolios, shell companies in Delaware, the Caymans, Luxembourg. And underneath it all, a network of legitimate businesses, construction firms, logistics companies, waste management, security services, all generating consistent income. How much? She asked, afraid of the answer. The trust currently holds assets valued at approximately $230 million, Arthur said calmly. But the true value isn't the money, it's the infrastructure. Your father built a system that connects to every major city in the Midwest. Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, Minneapolis. Politicians, unions, businesses, they all flow through companies your father created. He made himself indispensable. Elena couldn't breathe. $230 million? Plus the income generation, which runs about $20 million annually. Arthur pulled out another document, this one containing photographs and organizational charts. But there's something else. Something Marco definitely doesn't know about. He spread the papers across the desk. Elena saw faces, names, organizations. These are your father's contacts. His real network. The people who owed him favors, who relied on him for mediation, who trusted his word above any written contract. Arthur tapped a photo of an older man in a suit. This is Sal Moretti, Chicago North Side. Your father lent him $3 million to save his daughter when she was kidnapped. Sal never forgot. Another photo. Catherine Wu, San Francisco. Your father brokered peace between her organization and the Russian Bratva in '08. She owes the Castellano name a blood debt. More photos, more names, more debts, and alliances spanning 20 years. This is the real inheritance, Arthur said quietly. These people don't know Marco Vestri. They didn't pledge loyalty to him. They pledged it to Vincent Castellano and his bloodline. Which means they pledged it to you. Elena stared at the network her father had built. Not through violence, but through being useful. Through being trustworthy. Through solving problems others couldn't. Why didn't he tell me? She asked, her voice breaking. Why did he let me think there was nothing? Because he was protecting you. Arthur's expression was kind but firm. Vincent wanted you to have a choice. To live a normal life if you wanted. He knew this world. He gestured at the documents. Was dangerous. He didn't want to force it on you. But Marco forced it on me anyway.
Yes.
And now you get to decide what to do about it. Arthur closed the portfolio. These assets are yours, Elena. Legally, cleanly, uncontestably yours. Marco has no claim. He never did. The trust was structured specifically to prevent spousal access. Cale leaned forward. Can she take control immediately? The moment she signs the transfer documents, yes. But Arthur looked at Elena seriously. The moment you do, people will know you're alive. Marco will know. His allies will know. You'll become visible again. And this time with a target worth 230 million reasons. She'll need protection, Cale said. She'll need more than that, Arthur turned to Elena. You'll need to decide what you want to build with this. Your father's network is expecting Vincent Castellano's heir to be worthy of the name. Are you? Elena looked at the photographs of people her father had helped, the documents showing businesses he'd built, the careful architecture of power constructed over decades. Marco had used 15% of this to build his reputation. What could she do with everything? I was never abandoned, she said slowly, understanding dawning. I was underestimated. Arthur smiled. Your father would be proud of you for realizing that. Then yes, Elena said, her voice steady. I'm ready to claim what's mine. The call came 3 days after Elena signed the trust documents. She was in Cale's San Francisco safe house, reviewing dossiers on her father's Chicago contacts, when Sarah burst into the room holding a phone. You need to hear this, Sarah said, her expression grim. She hit speakerphone. A voice Elena hadn't heard in 3 weeks filled the room, smooth, familiar, laced with false concern.
Marco.
Understand you're scared, Elena. But hiding won't solve anything. We need to talk about what happened. About us. Elena's blood ran cold. The message continued. I know you're listening to this. Cale Romano's people aren't as invisible as he thinks. I know you're alive, and I know he has you a pause. I'm not angry, baby. You were terrified that night. Anyone would be. But I can protect you properly now. I've eliminated the threat. It's safe to come home. Sarah stopped the recording. It came through an encrypted messaging service, routed through 6 countries. Whoever gave him this number has serious access. Cale appeared in the doorway, already on his own phone. When did this arrive? 15 minutes ago. I've traced the... It doesn't matter, Cale's jaw was tight. He wanted us to trace it. This is a message. He knows where we are, or close enough. He looked at Elena. He's hunting. Elena's hands were surprisingly steady as she took the phone. Play the rest. Sarah hesitated, then complied. I'm staying at the Bellagio in Las Vegas for the next week, Marco's voice continued. Neutral territory. I've arranged a private dinner for this Saturday. Just you and me, Elena. We'll talk like adults, settle this misunderstanding, and you can decide what you want to do. No pressure. No threats. His tone shifted, became harder. But if you don't come, I'll assume Cale Romano has brainwashed you, and I'll have to take measures to bring you home. You know I have the resources. Don't make this difficult. The message ended. Elena set the phone down carefully. That was a threat disguised as an invitation. Of course it was. Cale paced the room like a caged predator. He can't get to you here, so he's trying to lure you out. Las Vegas is his territory. He's got allies there, politicians on payroll, security he controls. It's a trap, Sarah added. Obviously. Elena pulled up a map on her tablet, studying Las Vegas's layout. What does he actually want? He knows I don't have access to my father's assets. At least he thinks I don't. So why go through this performance? Cale stopped pacing. Because you're a loose end who knows too much. You've seen his documents, you know how he operates. And now you've disappeared with me, his enemy. He can't afford to let that stand. Plus, Sarah said darkly, he's probably furious that his plan failed. Men like Marco don't handle rejection well. Elena thought of Marco's cold eyes the night he'd pushed her out that door. The calculation in his expression. He mentioned settling a misunderstanding. Talking like adults, she looked up at Cale. He thinks I'm stupid enough to believe he wants to reconcile. He's counting on it. He married you because you were sheltered, controllable, naive. In his mind, You're still that woman. But I'm not, Elena stood, decision crystallizing. I'm going to Las Vegas. Absolutely not, Cale said immediately. He issued a challenge. If I hide, I prove him right, that I'm weak, that I need protection, that I'm still the same frightened girl. Elena met Cale's gaze steadily. And if he thinks that, everyone else will too. Your training, my father's legacy, the trust, none of it matters if I can't face Marco. You'll be walking into a death trap. Only if I walk in alone and unprepared. Elena pulled up the Bellagio's layout on her tablet. But I won't be alone. You'll have people in place. Sarah will prep me. And I'll have something Marco doesn't expect. I'll know exactly what he's planning. Cale studied her, his expression unreadable. You've changed. You wanted me to learn how this world works. I'm learning. Elena turned to Sarah. What would you do? Sarah exchanged a glance with Cale, then nodded slowly. If we're doing this insane thing, we control every variable we can. Plant our people in his people. Bug the entire penthouse. Have 3 extraction plans. And Elena wears a wire so we hear everything in real time. And weapons? Elena asked. On you?
No.
You'll be searched. But we'll have tactical teams positioned within 60 seconds of your location. Sarah's expression was fierce. You don't go in there to fight, Elena. You go in to gather intelligence, refuse whatever he offers, and get out alive. That's the only mission.
Elena nodded.
When do we leave? Tomorrow, Cale said, his voice resigned. We'll need time to position assets. But Elena, he stepped closer, his dark eyes intense. The moment anything feels wrong, you run. Don't wait for permission. Don't worry about looking weak. You run, and we extract you. Understood? Understood. I mean it. Marco is dangerous when cornered, and you refusing him will corner him. Cale's jaw tightened. He wanted a wife he could control. You're about to show him that woman is dead. Elena thought of the documents she'd signed 3 days ago. The trust worth $230 million. The network of people loyal to her father's name. The power Marco had stolen and spent without ever understanding its true value. He tried to make me disappear, she said quietly. Now I'm going to disappear his entire world. Saturday night.
Las Vegas.
One dinner with the man who'd orchestrated her death. Elena should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something dangerous. Ready. The Bellagio penthouse was obscenely luxurious, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip, a private terrace, a dining table set for 2 with crystal and candlelight. Marco stood by the windows, silhouetted against the neon glow of Las Vegas. He turned when Elena entered, and his smile was exactly as she remembered. Charming, calculated, empty. Elena, he moved toward her with open arms. Thank God you're safe. She sidestepped the embrace. Let's skip the performance, Marco. His smile faltered for just a moment. Then he recovered, gesturing to the table. Of course. You're angry. You have every right to be. Please sit. Let's talk. Elena sat, hyper-aware of the wire taped between her shoulder blades. Somewhere in a van 3 blocks away, Cale and his team were listening to every word. Marco's security had searched her thoroughly, but Sarah had hidden the device in a spot they'd been too professional to check. Marco poured wine with steady hands. I owe you an apology. That night, I panicked. The attack was unexpected, and I thought getting you outside was safer than keeping you in the crossfire. You locked the door. To protect you from stray bullets coming through. You texted Renzo's crew my location. Elena kept her voice level, casual. East Side Alley. Alone. Make it look random. Marco's hand froze halfway to his wine glass. For 3 seconds he didn't breathe. Then, he carefully set the bottle down. What has Cale Romano been telling you? The truth. Finally, Elena sipped her own wine. She'd watched Marco pour it, knew it wasn't drugged. You married me to access my father's assets. You tried to have me killed when I discovered the documents. You're not here to reconcile. You're here because I'm a loose end. Marco's mask cracked. The warmth drained from his eyes, replaced by something cold and reptilian. If you believe I'm so dangerous, why come? Because I'm done being afraid of you. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You think spending 3 weeks with Romano makes you strong? You're still the same sheltered girl I married. Playing dress-up in his world doesn't change what you are. And what's that?
Weak.
Dependent. Useful only for your name and your father's leftovers. Marco leaned back, his confidence returning. Speaking of which, we need to discuss the trust situation. I've been reviewing your father's estate, and there seem to be some accounts that require your signature too.
No. Marco blinked.
I haven't even explained. I said no. Elena set down her wine. I know about the trust, Marco. The real trust. The one you can't access, no matter what papers you forge. His expression darkened. What are you talking about? $230 million. 15 years of my father's carefully structured holdings. None of which you can touch, Elena smiled. Did you really think my father would build an empire and leave it vulnerable to someone like you? Marco stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. You've been talking to Arthur Leong. I've been talking to a lot of people. Learning about my father's real legacy. The businesses, the contacts, the network you've been clumsily trying to use without understanding. Elena stood too, maintaining the table between them. You got 15% of my father's assets, Marco. You thought it was everything, but it was barely enough to make you dangerous to yourself. You little. Marco caught himself, visibly controlling his temper. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously soft.
Elena.
Sweetheart, you're in over your head. Romano is using you to get to me. Once you're no longer useful, he'll discard you just like you did.
Elena interrupted.
At least Kale is honest about his motives. You pretended to love me while planning my murder. Marco pulled a document from inside his jacket, slapping it on the table. Sign this. It's a reconciliation agreement. You come home, we present a united front, and I'll forget this embarrassing episode with Romano ever happened. Elena glanced at the document. It was labeled Marital Asset Agreement, but the fine print transferred power of attorney to Marco for mutual business interests. You're not even trying to hide it anymore, she said. This gives you control of everything, including the trust. Sign it, Elena.
No.
Sign it. Marco slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. The mask was completely gone now, revealing the monster underneath. You think you can defy me? You think Romano can protect you? I own half the city. I own judges, police, politicians. You walk out that door without signing and you won't make it to the elevator. Elena's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Marco reached under his jacket. That's when the penthouse doors burst open. Kale's team moved like shadows, 6 figures in tactical gear, weapons trained on Marco before he could draw his own gun. Marco's security tried to react, but they were already neutralized, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Kale walked in last, unhurried, his expression deadly calm. The penthouse is secure, he said into his radio, then looked at Marco. You're right about one thing. Elena won't make it to the elevator. Because we're leaving by helicopter. But thanks for the confession. Every word is recorded. Marco's face went white. You were wired. Obviously, Elena picked up the document he'd tried to force her to sign. And this forgery of a reconciliation agreement? Your lawyers will love explaining it when my attorneys file for divorce. With cause. You can't. The marriage contract is void if you attempted spousal murder. Which you did. On camera, Kale nodded to his team. We're done here. 2 operators moved to escort Elena out, but Marco lunged forward with desperate rage. You're dead. Both of you. I'll hunt you down, Kale moved faster than Elena could follow. One moment Marco was shouting. The next he was on the floor, Kale's knee on his back, his arm twisted at a painful angle. Listen carefully, Kale said quietly. Elena Castellano is no longer your wife, your victim, or your concern. Touch her again and I won't be civilized about it. He released Marco and stood. Oh, and your Chicago accounts? Frozen as of 1 hour ago. Arthur Leong was very helpful. Marco struggled to his knees, his face twisted with fury and fear. This isn't over. Yes, Elena said, looking down at the man who'd tried to erase her. It is. Then she walked out, head high, while behind her Marco, Vestri's world began to crumble. They made it to the parking garage before everything went to hell. Elena was in the rear SUV of Kale's 3-vehicle convoy, Sarah beside her, 2 armed operators in front. The plan was simple: reach the private airstrip 20 minutes outside Vegas, fly back to San Francisco, and disappear while Marco scrambled to contain the damage. They were on Interstate 15, heading north through the desert darkness, when the first RPG hit. The lead vehicle exploded in a ball of flame, flipping twice before crashing into the median. Elena screamed as their driver swerved hard, barely avoiding the wreckage. Contact! Multiple vehicles closing fast, the operator in the passenger seat shouted into his radio. Sarah shoved Elena down below the window line. Stay down. Don't look up, don't move. Through the chaos, Elena heard Kale's voice over the radio. Box formation compromised. All units converge on the package. Get her out. Gunfire erupted, automatic weapons, dozens of them. Elena's SUV shuddered as rounds punched through the armored plating. The rear window spiderwebbed but held. They've got RPGs and 50 calories, the driver reported, his voice steady despite the madness. This isn't a hit squad. This is a goddamn army. Sarah was on her radio. Air support, how far? 15 minutes, came the crackling response. We don't have 15 minutes. Sarah pulled her weapon. Take the next exit. We need hard cover, not open highway. The SUV lurched right, taking the exit at 90 miles per hour. Behind them, Elena heard more explosions. How many attackers were there? They skidded into an industrial area, warehouses, shipping containers, abandoned buildings. The driver expertly wove between structures, trying to lose pursuit, but headlights appeared from every direction. They knew our route, Sarah said grimly. This was planned. The SUV slammed through a chain-link fence and into a warehouse complex. The driver killed the lights and engine, plunging them into darkness. Everyone out, Sarah ordered. We move on foot. Elena stumbled from the vehicle, her legs shaking. The air smelled like burning rubber and gunpowder. In the distance, she could see fires, their convoy destroyed. Kale, she whispered. Alive, Sarah said, checking her radio. 2 clicks west with the survivors. But we're separated, and Marco's people are sweeping the area. She grabbed Elena's arm. Listen to me. This is real combat. Not training. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. No questions. Understand? Elena nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. They moved through the warehouse complex like ghosts, Sarah leading, the 2 operators providing cover. Every shadow could be an enemy. Every sound could mean death. They'd made it 3 buildings deep when the lights came on, massive industrial floods that turned night into day. There, someone shouted in Italian. Gunfire chased them as they sprinted. Sarah returned fire, covering Elena while the operators laid down suppressing shots. They crashed through a door into a machine shop filled with heavy equipment. Behind the lathe, Sarah commanded, shoving Elena into cover. Don't move. Then Sarah was gone, drawing fire away from Elena's position. The 2 operators split up, creating crossfire. Elena huddled behind the industrial machine, hands over her ears, trying not to scream as bullets tore through metal and concrete around her. This was what Marco's world really looked like. Not dinner parties and business deals. This. Death and chaos and fear so pure it tasted like metal. A figure appeared in her peripheral vision. One of Marco's men, separated from his team, searching. He hadn't seen her yet. Elena's training screamed at her. Improvise, adapt, survive. Her hand found a heavy wrench on the floor. The man turned the corner, weapon raised. He saw her the same moment she swung. The wrench connected with his temple. He dropped, unconscious or dead. Elena didn't stay to find out. She grabbed his fallen weapon, a pistol, though her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it.
Anna.
Kale's voice, from somewhere close. Elena, answer me. Here, she called back. In the machine shop. Kale materialized from the smoke and shadows, his face streaked with blood and soot. Relief flooded his features when he saw her. You're alive. Barely, Elena showed him the pistol. There was a man, I hit him. Good, Kale checked the weapon, ensured it was loaded, then guided her toward the back exit. Sarah? West Side, engaging hostiles, came the response over radio. How's our package? Intact. Regrouping at Rally Point B. They burst into the desert night, away from the lights and gunfire. Behind them, the battle continued, Sarah's team buying them time to escape. Kale led Elena to a dry riverbed where two more of his people waited with a dusty pickup truck.
Get in, he ordered.
We're going dark until extraction. As they drove away from the chaos, Elena finally allowed herself to shake. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her cold and nauseous. How many did we lose? She asked quietly. Kale's jaw tightened. 4 confirmed dead. 3 more critical. Marco brought at least 30 men. Military-grade weapons. Someone funded this operation. He's declared war. He signed his death warrant. Kale looked at her, his eyes hard. This attack just proved everything we told the authorities about him. Every family that was neutral, they just saw Marco Vestri launch a military assault on American soil. He's finished. Elena thought of the lead vehicle exploding, of the men who died protecting her, of the man she'd hit with a wrench, not knowing if she'd killed him. I want him destroyed, she said, her voice steel. Not arrested. Not weakened.
Destroyed.
Kale studied her face, saw something there that made him nod slowly. Then let's give you the tools to do it. The truck disappeared into the Nevada desert, leaving behind burning vehicles and Marco's biggest mistake, thinking Elena Castellano would die quietly. He'd wanted war. Now he would get it. The Phoenix compound was nothing like the training facility in Northern California. This was a fortress, concrete walls, armed guards, surveillance everywhere. A place built for war, not education. Elena arrived 2 days after the Vegas attack, still processing what had happened. She'd killed a man. Maybe. She didn't know for certain, and no one would tell her. Sarah said it didn't matter. Survival was survival. But it mattered to Elena. Kale was waiting in the compound's operations center, surrounded by screens showing news coverage of the Vegas incident. Every major outlet was running the story. Gang violence erupts on Las Vegas Strip. Multiple dead. They're calling it gang violence, Elena said, joining him. Because that's what we're letting them call it. For now, Kale gestured to a chair at the large conference table. My council arrives in 1 hour. They're the people who actually run my operations, logistics, enforcement, legal, finance. They want to see the woman who almost got 8 of my people killed. Elena's stomach dropped. They blame me. They blame me for deviating from the plan to protect an asset. Kale's expression was unreadable. You need to prove you're worth the deviation.
How?
By being more than a victim I'm protecting. By being useful, he pulled up files on the main screen, dossiers, financial records, surveillance photos. These are Marco's current operations. His crews, his lieutenants, his revenue streams. I need you to look at them and tell me what I'm missing. I'm not an analyst. You're his wife. You lived in his house, attended his meetings, heard his conversations. Kale's gaze was intense. You know things you don't even realize you know. Information a wife absorbs without thinking. That's what I need. For the next 40 minutes, Elena studied the files. At first, nothing stood out, just names and numbers and surveillance photos of dangerous men. But then she saw a face she recognized.
Wait.
Go back, she pointed to a photo. That man. Vincent Calabrese. He was at her house 6 months ago. Calabrese runs Marco's drug distribution. What about him? Marco hated him. I heard them arguing in the study. Calabrese wanted a bigger percentage. said Marco was cutting him out of deals. Elena's mind raced, pulling up half-forgotten memories. Marco told someone on the phone afterward that Calabrese was getting greedy, that he'd handle it soon. Cale leaned forward. Handle it how? I don't know. But the way Marco said it, Elena closed her eyes, remembering. It was the same tone he used when he talked about me being a loose end. Cale immediately started typing. If Marco's planning to eliminate Calabrese, that's leverage. Calabrese has his own crew, his own territory. If we warn him, show him proof Marco's planning to betray him, he'd flip. Elena finished. Turn on Marco. Maybe Cale pulled up more files. What else? Anyone else Marco planned to handle? Elena went through the photos one by one, pulling up memories she'd suppressed or ignored. The wife who was supposed to smile and stay silent had actually been absorbing everything. This man, Giancarlo Russo, Marco's accountant. I saw him at the house 3 weeks before I ran. He looked terrified. Marco was threatening him about something. Threatening him how? I couldn't hear everything, but Marco mentioned Russo's daughter. Said it would be unfortunate if anything happened to her. Elena's hands clenched. Marco uses families as leverage. Always. Cale's expression darkened. That's useful. If Russo's afraid for his daughter, we can offer protection in exchange for Marco's financial records. The door opened and 4 people entered, 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed professionally but radiating danger. These were Cale's inner council. This is her. A man with silver hair and a Brooklyn accent looked Elena up and down. The wife.
Elena Castellano, Gael Kerektid.
Not Elena Vestri. Never was, really. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s sat across from Elena. You cost us 4 people in Vegas. Tell me why we shouldn't cut our losses and put you on a plane to somewhere Marco can't find you. Elena met her gaze steadily. Because I just gave Cale 2 vulnerabilities in Marco's organization that you didn't know existed. And I can give you more. She identified Calabrese as a target for elimination, Cale explained. And confirmed Russo is being coerced, not loyal. Both are actionable intelligence. The silver-haired man grunted. Anyone who lived with Vestri could pick up gossip. It's not gossip, Elena interrupted. Vincent Calabrese moves shipments through the port of Long Beach every Tuesday and Thursday. Marco thinks he doesn't know, but I heard Calabrese on the phone coordinating it. He's skimming product before Marco's people count it. The room went silent. How much is he skimming? The woman asked. Enough that Marco's losing $300,000 a month without realizing it. Elena pulled up numbers from memory, dates and amounts she'd overheard. Calabrese has been doing it for at least 8 months. Maybe longer. Cale's counsel exchanged glances. The silver-haired man leaned back, reassessing. If that's accurate. It's accurate, Elena said firmly. I'm not guessing.
I'm remembering.
The woman smiled slightly. You've been paying attention. I've been surviving. Elena looked at each council member in turn. Marco married me because he thought I was decorative and stupid. Easy to control. He never imagined I was actually listening, learning, understanding his business better than he thought. And now, the third man asked, speaking for the first time, what do you want from this? Revenge. Elena thought of the burning vehicles on I-15, of the men who died protecting her, of 3 years living with a monster who'd pretended to love her. I want Marco to lose everything he stole from my father. Every asset, every ally, every piece of power he built on my family's name. She paused. And I want to be the one who takes it from him. Cale's counsel studied her, no longer seeing a victim or liability, but something else. Something potentially dangerous. She's got steel, the woman finally said. I'll give her that. The silver-haired man nodded slowly. If she can deliver what she's promising, Calabrese, Russo, and whatever else she knows, then maybe she's worth the trouble. Cale looked at Elena. They're giving you a chance. Don't waste it. I won't, Elena promised. Because she wasn't Marco's abandoned wife anymore. She was Vincent Castellano's daughter. And it was time everyone remembered what that meant. Chicago in November was brutal. Wind cutting through the streets like knives, gray skies promising snow. Elena stood outside her father's old office building on South Michigan Avenue, Cale beside her, and felt like she was stepping into a life she'd never known existed. "Your father owned this building," Cale said quietly, along with 6 others in the loop. "Legitimate real estate, legitimate businesses. Nothing Marco can claim or contest. But people inside know what he really was. They know what matters, that Vincent Castellano kept his word, paid his debts, and protected his own." Cale adjusted his coat. Now they're about to meet his daughter. Arthur Leong waited in the lobby, looking nervous. "They're all here. The entire network. When I sent word that Vincent's daughter was coming to claim her inheritance, everyone wanted to see for themselves." "How many?" Elena asked. 37 representatives from families across the Midwest. Some are legitimate business people who happen to work with your father. Others, Arthur trailed off meaningfully. Others run organizations that don't appear on any tax forms. Elena's heart hammered. This was it, the moment she stopped being Marco's victim and became her father's heir. Let's not keep them waiting. The conference room on the 20th floor could have belonged to any corporation. Polished table, leather chairs, city views. Except the people gathered there weren't corporate executives. Elena recognized faces from the dossiers Arthur had shown her. Sal Moretti from Chicago's North Side, Catherine Wu from San Francisco, the Kozlov brothers from Detroit, Maria Santos from Milwaukee. These were her father's allies. His network. His legacy. Every conversation stopped when she entered. Sal Moretti stood first, a bear of a man in his 60s with white hair and sharp eyes. He studied Elena for a long moment, then his weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Madonna," he breathed. "You look just like him. Same eyes. Same way of standing." He came around the table and, to Elena's surprise, took her hand gently. "Vincent saved my daughter's life 20 years ago. I told him then I owed the Castellano family a blood debt. That debt doesn't die with him." Catherine Wu approached next, elegant in a tailored suit. "Your father brokered peace when my organization was at war with the Russians. He asked for nothing in return except my word that I'd remember." She nodded respectfully. "I remember." One by one they came forward. Each had a story. Each owed Vincent Castellano something that couldn't be measured in money. A saved life, a prevented war, a debt forgiven, a connection made. Elena felt tears threatening and forced them back. "Thank you. All of you. I wish I'd known him the way you did." "Vincent kept you separate for a reason," Sal said gruffly. "He wanted you safe. Away from this life. But now I'm here," Elena said, finding her voice. "And I need to know, will you honor the pledges you made to my father? Or did they die with him?" The room exchanged glances. An older man with a Russian accent spoke up. "The girl asks a fair question. Vincent is gone. His daughter married Marco Vestri, our enemy. Why should we pledge anything to her?" "Because Marco Vestri stole from her," Cale said, speaking for the first time. "He married her under false pretenses, used her name to access Vincent's assets, then tried to have her killed when she discovered the truth. Elena isn't Marco's wife, she's his victim. And now she's his enemy." "Pretty words," the Russian said. "But what does she know of this business? She's been a civilian her whole life." Elena stepped forward. "You're Dmitry Kozlov. You run waste management contracts in Detroit and Cleveland. My father helped you secure city contracts in 2015 when the mayor's office was investigating your operations. He provided legal cover through his construction companies." Kozlov's eyebrows rose. "How do you know this?" "Because I've spent the last month learning everything about my father's network. Every alliance, every favor, every debt." Elena turned to another man. "Marcus Webb, Louisville. My father lent you $2 million when your distribution network was seized by the DEA. You paid him back in 3 years, no interest." Webb nodded slowly, impressed. Elena addressed the room. "I may not have grown up in this world, but I'm Vincent Castellano's daughter. His blood. His heir. And unlike Marco Vestri, I understand what my father actually built. Not just money, but trust. Reliability. A network where people kept their word. And what do you want from us? Catherine Wu asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. I want what's mine. Marco Vestri has been operating under the Castellano name for 3 years, making deals and promises he has no right to make. He's damaged my father's reputation and stolen from the infrastructure my father spent 20 years building. Elena's voice hardened. I'm taking it back. All of it. Every asset, every contact, every piece of territory Marco claimed using my name. That's war, Sal said quietly. War already started. Marco tried to kill me in Las Vegas 3 days ago. Military-style assault, 30 men, RPGs. Elena let that sink in. He's desperate and sloppy. This is the time to move against him. And if we help you? The Russian asked. What do we get? The same thing my father gave you. Fair dealing, kept promises, and a network you can trust. Elena paused. Plus 15% of everything I take from Marco, distributed proportionally based on your assistance. The room erupted in conversation. 15% of Marco's empire was substantial. Catherine Wu smiled. Your father taught you well, even if you didn't know it. Arthur cleared his throat. There's one more thing. The legal documents. He distributed folders around the table. These confirm Elena's control of the Castellano Trust and all associated assets. Marco Vestri has no legal claim to any of it. Every contract he signed using Castellano resources is now void. Sal opened his folder, reading quickly. His smile grew. You're handing us legal grounds to break every agreement Marco made. Beautiful. My father built power that couldn't be seized because it was legitimate, Elena said. I'm using that same legitimacy to strip Marco of everything he stole. Dmitry Kozlov stood, and the room went quiet. I knew Vincent Castellano for 25 years. He was a man of honor in a world with little honor. He looked at Elena. His daughter speaks like him, thinks like him. I believe she is worthy of the name. He extended his hand. The Kozlov family pledges support to Elena Castellano. One by one, others stood. Sal Moretti, Catherine Wu, Marcus Webb, representatives from Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Cleveland. The network her father built was hers now. Arthur looked overwhelmed with relief. Cale's expression held something like pride. Elena shook each hand, accepted each pledge, and felt power settle on her shoulders like a mantle. She'd come to Chicago as Marco's abandoned wife. She was leaving as something much more dangerous. Her father's daughter. Her own woman. A force Marco Vestri should have killed when he had the chance. The underground club in Manhattan was neutral territory, a place where business was conducted, deals were made, and blood was never spilled. It was owned by the 5 families collectively, a Switzerland in the heart of New York where even enemies could meet safely. Elena walked through the entrance in a black dress that cost more than most cars, her hair pulled back, her father's platinum ring on her right hand, a ring Arthur had given her in Chicago, the Castellano family seal. Behind her, Cale moved like a shadow. This wasn't his city, but his reputation preceded him. Marco was already there, holding court at a private table surrounded by his remaining lieutenants. He looked thinner than Elena remembered, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose. The Vegas incident had cost him more than soldiers. It had cost him confidence. He saw her and froze, wine glass halfway to his lips. The entire club seemed to hold its breath. Elena crossed the floor slowly, deliberately, ignoring the stares. Every major family had representatives here tonight. She'd made sure of it. This confrontation needed witnesses. Hello, Marco, she said, stopping at his table.
You look surprised.
Did you think I'd stay hidden? Marco recovered quickly, setting down his glass with forced calm.
Anna.
I'm glad you're alive. Despite what Cale Romano has told you, I never wanted. Stop, her voice cut through his lie like a blade. We're past pretense. You tried to have me killed. It failed. Now we're here. This is neutral ground, one of Marco's men said, half standing. You can't. I'm not here to fight, Elena said. I'm here to talk.
Publicly.
So everyone can hear the truth. Marco's eyes narrowed. What truth? That you're a fraud. Elena pulled out a folder and dropped it on the table. That every deal you've made, every alliance you've claimed, every piece of territory you control, all of it was built on my father's name and my father's assets. Assets you stole by marrying me under false pretenses. We're married. What's yours is legally mine. Not according to the Castellano Trust. Arthur Leong appeared from the crowd, pristine as always, which was structured specifically to prevent spousal access. Miss Castellano's inheritance is entirely separate from any marital property. Marco's face went pale. That's impossible. I control. You control nothing, Elena interrupted. The $40 million you accessed through our marriage? That was 15% of my father's actual holdings. The other 85%, $230 million, plus all the business infrastructure, has always been mine. You just didn't know it existed. Murmurs rippled through the club. People were recording this on phones. Word would spread within hours. You're lying, Marco said, but his voice shook. The Castellano Trust, established 2008, managed by Arthur Leong. Elena's voice carried across the club. Primary assets include construction companies, logistics operations, real estate holdings, and offshore accounts spanning 14 states. All generating approximately $20 million annually in legitimate income, she paused. All transferred to me legally last week. You have no claim. You never did.
Marco stood abruptly.
I'm still your husband. Not for long. My attorneys filed for divorce 3 days ago. Grounds: attempted murder, fraud, and coercion. Elena opened the folder, revealing photographs. This is you, texting Dominic Renzo's crew my location the night of the attack. This is your instruction to tie up the loose end, and this, she pulled out another document, is the forged reconciliation agreement you tried to force me to sign in Las Vegas. The room erupted. Attempted murder was one thing. Everyone in this world understood violence. But drugging and coercing your own wife, trying to steal her inheritance through legal fraud? That was different. That was dishonorable. She's working with Romano.
Marcos shouted desperately.
He's manipulating her. I'm standing right here, Elena said coldly. Speaking for myself. Making my own choices. Something you never thought I was capable of. A man Elena recognized from her research stood from a nearby table, Thomas Gallo, one of the 5 family's senior members. Marco Vestri, you operated in New York under the presumption that you controlled Castellano assets. If those assets were never legally yours, then every deal you made here was based on false representation. That's not. I can explain. And the Las Vegas attack, another voice added. This was James Chun, West Coast Operations. Military assault on American soil. RPGs on the interstate. You brought heat down on all of us. That was Romano's fault. Marco pointed at Kale. He kidnapped my wife. I left voluntarily, Elena said. After you locked me outside to die. You have no proof. We have surveillance footage.
Audio recordings.
Text messages. Your own men's testimony. Vincent Calabrese and Giancarlo Russo both flipped yesterday. They're providing everything, Elena leaned forward. You're finished, Marco. Your soldiers are abandoning you. Your allies are walking away. The only question is whether you leave quietly or whether we dismantle you piece by piece. Marco lunged across the table, hands reaching for Elena's throat. He never made it. Kale moved like lightning, intercepting Marco and slamming him back into his chair. 2 of Gallo's men appeared instantly, weapons drawn but not pointed, a reminder that violence here had consequences. Touch her again, Kale said quietly, and neutral ground won't save you. Marco slumped in his chair, defeated. His men were backing away, rats leaving a sinking ship. Thomas Gallo stood formally. Marco Vestri, by attempting violence on neutral ground, you violated sanctuary. Your right to protection here is revoked. He looked around the room. Does anyone here still recognize Marco Vestri's claim to Castellano operations? Silence. Does anyone here pledge continued alliance with Marco Vestri? More silence. Even his own men refused to speak. Then it's decided. Gallo turned to Elena. The Castellano name and network are yours by right of blood and law. Marco Vestri is declared persona non grata in New York operations. Elena looked down at Marco. This man who'd pretended to love her, who'd used her, who'd tried to erase her. He looked small now. Broken. You took 3 years of my life, she said softly. You made me doubt myself, fear you, think I was nothing without you. She straightened. Thank you. Marco's head snapped up, confused. Thank you for underestimating me. For being so arrogant, you never imagined I'd learn, adapt, and fight back. Elena smiled, cold and sharp. You created your own worst enemy. I hope that knowledge haunts you. She turned and walked away, Cale beside her, leaving Marco Vestri sitting alone at a table in a room full of people who no longer acknowledged his existence. The abandoned wife was dead. Something far more dangerous had taken her place. 6 weeks later, Los Angeles wore its winter like jewelry, crisp air, clear skies, the Pacific glittering under December sun. Elena stood on the terrace of a Beverly Hills estate that had once belonged to her father, looking out over the city where her old life had died in an alley. Today, that alley felt like it belonged to someone else's story. Behind her, inside the mansion, representatives from every major criminal organization in America were gathering. Not for violence or intimidation, but for something that hadn't happened in 20 years, a summit to redraw territorial lines and establish new leadership. Cale appeared beside her, dressed in a dark suit, looking every inch the billionaire kingpin. They're ready. Everyone who matters is here. Including Marco's old allies. Especially them. They're eager to pledge to the winning side. Cale's expression was unreadable. You know this changes everything. Once you walk into that room and claim leadership, there's no going back to civilian life. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago. Afraid, controlled, ornamental. That woman had died the night Marco pushed her out a door and locked it behind her. I don't want to go back, she said simply. Inside, the great room had been transformed into a council chamber. 50 people occupied seats arranged in a semicircle, power brokers from Chicago, New York, Detroit, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Miami. People who controlled shipping routes, labor unions, construction contracts, political appointments. The shadow infrastructure of American commerce. Sarah Chin stood near the door, no longer just Elena's protector, but her head of security. Arthur Leong sat at a side table with legal documents. Sal Moretti, Catherine Wu, and the others who'd pledged in Chicago occupied positions of honor. And at the center of it all, 2 chairs sat empty, waiting. Elena walked to those chairs, Cale beside her, and the room fell silent. Thomas Gallo stood to speak, his authority acknowledged by everyone present. We gather today to acknowledge a transfer of power. Vincent Castellano built an empire through strategy, honor, and reliability. His daughter, Elena Castellano, has proven herself worthy of that legacy. He gestured to Elena. She dismantled Marco Vestri's organization in 6 weeks without starting a war. She recovered stolen assets, secured loyalty from her father's network, and did it all within the framework of law and honor our world respects. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. But there are questions, Gallo continued. Miss Castellano, you've claimed your father's empire. Do you intend to merge it with Cale Romano's Western operations? Because such a merger would create a power imbalance that concerns many here. Every eye turned to Elena. This was the moment, the question everyone wanted answered. Would she become Cale's partner? His subordinate? His equal? Elena stood, her voice clear and steady. My father built an autonomous network based on mutual benefit and kept promises. He didn't answer to New York. He didn't answer to the West Coast. He built something independent that worked with everyone, but belonged to no one. She paused. I intend to honor that legacy. So you refuse alliance with Romano? Someone asked. I didn't say that. Elena looked at Cale, who watched her with those dark, calculating eyes. Kale Romano saved my life. He trained me, protected me, and helped me claim what was mine. I owe him a debt. Kale stood slowly. And I'm here to release her from it. The room stirred with surprise. When I rescued Elena, Kale continued, I planned to use her as a weapon against Marco Vestri. A pawn in my game, he smiled slightly. But pawns don't usually learn to play the game better than you expected. Elena proved she's not a tool, she's a strategist in her own right. Vincent Castellano's true heir. He turned to face Elena fully, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. I propose an alliance, not a merger. Castellano operations remain autonomous under Elena's leadership. Romano operations remain autonomous under mine. But where our interests align, we coordinate. We support each other. We build something stronger than either of us could build alone. An equal partnership? Catherine Wu asked, sounding intrigued. Equal, Kale confirmed. He extended his hand to Elena. If she'll have it. Elena looked at that offered hand. At the man who'd saved her, but also manipulated her. Who'd trained her, but also used her. Who'd become something unexpected along the way. A partner, perhaps. Maybe more, eventually. But right now, in this moment, what mattered was power and respect. She took his hand. Alliance accepted. Castellano and Romano operations remained separate but cooperative. The room exploded with conversation. This was unprecedented. Two major organizations choosing coordination over competition or merger. But it was also brilliant. United, they'd be unstoppable. Divided, they'd both remain strong. Thomas Gallo raised his hand for silence. Then it's decided. Elena Castellano is recognized as leader of the Castellano network. Her authority over Midwest operations is acknowledged. Her alliance with Kale Romano is noted and respected. He looked directly at Elena. Welcome to the table, Miss Castellano. Your father would be proud. One by one, representatives stood to pledge respect, not submission but acknowledgement. Elena had done what few managed, earned her place through intelligence and strategy rather than violence and intimidation. As the formal proceedings ended and people moved into informal conversations, Sal Moretti approached Elena with misty eyes. Vincent used to stand right where you're standing, he said gruffly. Same confident posture. Same careful way of thinking 3 moves ahead. He gripped her shoulder. You're not just his daughter. You're his legacy. Elena felt tears threaten but held them back. Thank you, Sal. Later, as the crowd thinned, Elena found herself on the terrace again. The sun was setting, painting Los Angeles in gold and fire. Kale joined her, holding 2 glasses of wine. Congratulations. You're officially one of the most powerful people in American organized crime. Is that what this is? Elena asked, accepting the wine. Power. That's what you made it. Kale studied her profile. You could have chosen revenge. Could have had Marco killed. Many would have supported it. But instead, you stripped him of everything and left him alive to live with his failure. That's cruelty dressed as mercy. The best kind of power. Where is he now? Last I heard, living in a studio apartment in Newark, working as a car salesman. All his assets frozen, all his allies gone, facing a dozen lawsuits from people he borrowed from. Kale smiled. A living ghost. Elena sipped her wine, thinking of the man who'd married her for her name and nearly destroyed her. Now he was nothing, while she stood in her father's house, commanding her father's empire, making alliances with people who'd once terrified her. What happens now? She asked. Now you lead. You build. You prove this wasn't luck but skill. Kale turned to face her fully. And eventually, when you're ready, we have a different conversation. About what? His dark eyes held hers, intense and unguarded for once. About whether this alliance is all we are. Elena's heart skipped, but she kept her expression neutral. One empire at a time, Kale. He laughed, genuine, warm. Fair enough. As night fell over Los Angeles, Elena Castellano stood on her terrace, surrounded by people who respected her, commanding resources her father had built, allied with the man who'd saved her and shaped her into something dangerous. Marco Vestri had abandoned his wife in an alley, thinking her worthless. That abandoned wife was gone, erased, forgotten. In her place stood someone new, someone powerful, someone who'd learned the rules of a brutal world and bent them to her will. The criminal underworld whispered a new name now. Not Marco Vestri's victim. Not even just Vincent Castellano's daughter.
Elena Castellano.
The queen who rose from nothing. The woman who turned abandonment into coronation. She was the legend people would talk about for years. The abandoned wife who became a queen, who proved that underestimating a woman was the deadliest mistake a man could make. And her empire was just beginning.
The end.